All right, so first off, a little bit about me. I started off my career, pre my career, reading maths at university. And for anyone that knows anything about a maths course, it has absolutely nothing to do with real life. So throughout my time there, I kept looking for ways to apply maths problem solving to the real world. That's why I was really interested in it. And I ended up writing a paper on what's called numerical solutions to real-world problems. What that basically means is taking a very educated guess to try and mimic real life. And that's going to be a very, very strong theme in what I think product in VC is today. When I left university, my very first job was at a B2B SaaS company, and it was venture-backed. It was Goldman and KKR-backed. And what they did was try and help big multinational corporations with data-driven decision-making. So think your Walmarts, your HSBCs of the world. How do they make sure that they're making data-driven decisions when half of the time they don't really know what's going on in their stores or their branches? So we as a company would take all of their data, we would clean it up, we would ETL it for them, and then we would help them inform their decision-making and what we would call institutionalized data-driven decision-making. So that was a very exciting job. I was part-time data engineer, part-time consultant, really enjoying myself. And then the company got acquired by MasterCard. And so I got sucked into a big corporate machine and became a strategy consultant for a little while. I was really missing the small-time, kind of scrappy nature of a startup, so I started working with fintechs, trying to get back to that sort of area, and eventually decided, you know what, that's what I want to be doing full-time. So I went and joined a fintech called Alika. You may not know Alika if you're not based in the UK, but Alika was founded by the ex-COO at Revolut, and they were trying to do, or they are trying to do, what Revolut has done for established SMEs in the UK. When I joined, they didn't have any transactional banking at all. So I joined to lead product there. And the first thing I did was build their very first current account in 6 months with 4 people, which was very, very intense. But that's what made me fall in love with product. So I carried on doing that at Alika. I ended up leading product across 4 product squads, 27 people, and then got the knock on the door from Balderton to say, why don't you come and do product here? So that's enough about me. Now on to product. So I'm sure some of you will be very, very familiar with what product means, and some of you maybe not so much. So I'm going to start off with defining the product function. So usually you find a product function in a tech company, and it's engineers, product managers, product designers in a cross-functional team, building and then looking after a product throughout its life cycle. So gone are the old days of we build tech, we drop it in, and we run away. This is a team that's dedicated to serving that technology. Sometimes you can find non-technical people in these squads as well. So I've worked in product teams where you have marketing people, operations people. Really, the key is it's cross-functional people who are experts in an area. Now, the natural question or the natural next step to this is, okay, what is this doing in a VC? Why should we have a product function in a firm that is not really at its core a tech company? I would probably highlight 3 key elements of the venture capital space, and in particular, some of which have come around quite recently. So the first is there is a lot of repeated manual work in a VC. Even some of the most data-driven VCs are still doing a lot of things manually. And a lot of these haven't really been automated or haven't been automatable until recently. The second thing that I would highlight is increasing volumes of information. So the number of startups which are venture backable is just exponentially growing, particularly in Europe. And the amount of information available about these companies is also growing rapidly. You can now find third-party data sources for literally anything. Finally, leaps forward in tech and AI. Now, this is really important because for anyone that's ever dealt with VC data, it is notoriously patchy. We're often kind of dealing in the shadows and the gray area, and a lot of that information is unstructured. And if maybe 10 years ago you thought about applying tech to a problem like that, someone would probably just tell you it'd be faster to do it yourself. But now the technologies that we are seeing can actually handle outliers like that without costing you an arm and a leg in compute. So this might sound great in principle, but in practice, what are some of the examples of the areas you can apply a product function to? Now, I think it's very common to talk about the investment process, the investment team, sourcing, filtering, DD. But actually, my role at Balderson is very horizontal. And that was one of the things that appealed to me about the role. Because the core of what you're trying to do, this automation, this tech-driven, data-driven approach, can be applied across the whole life cycle, right? We all know this. So there's loads of value in product in the operations side of a VC, and also in the portfolio servicing part of a VC. So a few examples, automated portfolio monitoring. Your portfolio companies send you board packs, lovely, pretty PDFs. How do you turn those into reporting for your partners and your LPs? Or network mapping. One of the great things about VCs is they seem to know everyone. But how do we capitalize on that in a structured and tech-driven way, rather than sending out those emails to the whole firm? Hey, does anyone know anyone at this company? Another example, company onboarding. So if you're one of the larger VCs, you're probably onboarding 10s, 20s, 30s plus of companies every year. That process might seem tailor-made and one-off, but actually there's lots of elements of that that can be automated. Document search. Who has a gigantic Google Drive of lots and lots of documents, and they can never find the right one? So these are just a few examples of areas where I personally think product and a product mindset can be hugely valuable. And the reason I say product mindset, not just using data and tech, is because some of these you could chuck a lot of resources at before you get to an answer, before you get to some value. And actually, the great thing I think about product is that you try and do a lot with very little. So how do you go about doing this? So these are some quotes, some slightly edited quotes of things that people have said to me when I've spoken to them about, okay, how do you think about productizing a VC? Some of these might be familiar to you. Number one, just hire a data scientist and get them to build you something. A lot of people, when they think about, I want to use tech here, they hire a data scientist. Number two, we're not a tech company. So just buy something or hire a consultant. But we shouldn't be doing this ourselves. This is not our business model. Number three, why not try no-code tools? A lot of what we're trying to do can't be that hard. Just use Zapier or Airtable to automate those processes that are happening all the time. Now, I might sound skeptical, but actually, I don't think any of these people are wrong. For me, the real question is, when is which one correct? And actually, there's a bit of a scale here. There's a bit of a sliding scale between what I call the Copilot approach and what is very popularly termed Quant VC. When I say Copilot, I mean a mindset that ultimately the team are the best people to get the job done, but we need to give them the right tools. And when I say Quant VC, I mean no more humans anymore, please. And this is a sliding scale, and there are stages going from left to right. So starting off on the very, very Copilot end, I'm talking about process automation. So just identifying places where people are doing things again and again, and automating as much as possible. Process automation, process engineering, it doesn't have to be high tech, but it can get the job done. If we want to go slightly more technical, slightly more complicated, we might say, actually, we want to provide our team with slightly more data than they have today. So, for example, you're doing your quarterly reporting, you've got all your financials, can you get a data feed that can give you a summary of all the news on that portfolio company in the past 3 months and automatically feed that in? So we're providing a little bit more of a complete picture. We're helping people find information more quickly. As we go further to the right, we can then actually start to fully automate parts of the process. So no human beings in certain elements. So for example, your data-driven sourcing, using data signals to find the next company that your team should be looking at. If we go one stage further, this is a hot topic for us at the moment. What are the analyst tasks that can be automated? So for example, can you actually extract financials from a pitch deck or a chart and start to do some of that financial modeling automatically? And then finally, on the right-hand side, what is sometimes seen as the holy grail, which is, can we replace the full investment pipeline? So if you were taking this to the extreme, you can imagine an AI partner in your IC that's voting. And instead of being a human being meeting the team, that AI partner is ingesting all of the third-party data out there about the company and using that to make a decision. So we have a bit of a sliding scale here. Some people are religiously attached to one end or the other. And this tends to be a very interesting discussion if you ask someone what their view is. But my personal opinion is lots of these different elements make sense for lots of different types of funds. And it really depends who you are and what you're trying to do as to which approach you should take. So if we think about a Copilot approach, so giving your team superpowers, in a world where Copilot makes sense, you probably are aiming to have a white glove target user experience. And what I mean by this is, for example, the companies you're investing in expect to have a human to talk to. They don't expect automated email outreach until you respond. They expect you to talk to them about their business. Information has poor availability or is too expensive. So a good example of this is founder and team characteristics. There's lots of people trying to solve this problem and to quantify how good a team is. But at the moment, it's very hard to get hold of that data in a structured way, and it's not going to be cheap. And finally, a low volume or low repeatability business model. So if you're only investing in a handful of companies every year, it's probably not worth spending the money to automate a lot of that, especially if you're going for that white glove target user experience in the first place. One of my favorite catchphrases that I say internally again and again is, if the right way to do this is carrier pigeon, that's what we're going to do. If that's the cheapest and most efficient way to do it, that's what we're going to do. Don't be addicted to the technology. Now, on the other side of things, sometimes a quant VC approach makes sense. I'm going to quickly define quant VC in my world, because I know it means different things to different people. So I'm talking about a fully automated approach, the entire investment lifecycle driven by a series of ultimately models. And those can predict anything from how well is this company going to do, is it going to succeed, to how great is this person. Actually, it could be applicable not just to investment decisions, but also to portfolio support. So for example, we're hiring a new CXO. Find me, identify for me what the top candidates are going to be. This type of approach does make sense, but in specific situations for now. So I'm talking about areas where there's very frequent high data availability, and it doesn't cost too much. So you can get the data that you need when you need it, and the coverage is good enough that you can use it for modeling. Secondly, there is a large volume of applicable events. So as I said previously, if you're making a handful of investments a year, does this make sense? If you're investing in hundreds of companies in a year, that volume is probably high enough that ROI-wise, this is going to make sense. And finally, there is a benefit here if technology is your competitive advantage. So there are funds out there where what they do is use technology to find companies that other people can't. If that is your thing, obviously quant VC makes sense. But that is not the character of every VC. So having talked about where both of these approaches make sense, I'm going to do what every good product person does and give you a framework. No framework is perfect, so feel free to grill me later in the questions. But my framework is attempting to talk about where different approaches make sense. And I've done this based on two different axes. So the one along the bottom is what's your data availability, so going from low on the left-hand side to high on the right-hand side. And volume, so the volume of transactions, events, whatever it is that we're talking about, hires that you make every year, low at the bottom, high at the top. I'm actually going to start on the right-hand side, looking at later growth stage. So often, in my experience or from my observations, these types of companies require a white glove approach. They expect a partner to be talking to them, talking to the leadership team. They're not going to do the automated emails, send me this, send me that. It might even be the case that manual work here makes sense, or a Copilot approach. So give your team the best tools to do the job. Automate as much of their financial modeling as you can. Automate their market mapping, the expert call transcript analysis. But fully automating that investment process, in my view, is going to be tricky. If we go to Series B or C, here the data availability is much better, right? But people aren't expecting that white glove approach. Quantitative methods can be accurate if you can get the right data access, but there's a real call out here, and I wouldn't be a good product person if I wasn't telling you this. Be mindful of your customer experience. Bear in mind that these founders might one day be your best performing companies, and make sure you're still giving them a good experience. Series A, so far in my observation, the most important thing is having the right toolkit and the process automation part of things. So for example, if your team is meeting on average per person 5 or 6 companies a day, how can you make sure that they're doing minimal admin work? Getting their call transcripts, summarizing them, putting them in the CRM for them, re-tagging their pipeline for them. But founder and team assessments, I think there's still a question mark as to whether you can automate them and how much you can automate them. I think there's still value in having that dinner with the 2 founders in a restaurant and getting to know them. And finally, pre-seed or seed. Quantitative methods for sourcing could help you find deals that others can't. There is a large enough volume, but the barrier to entry is high, right? The cost to buying or creating all of that data you need to drive those models is going to be high. I'm going to finish off with this framework by saying there's another dimension here which I think you can consider, but I didn't want to make my slide too complicated. And that's around your fund size and whether you're an established fund or a challenger fund. I think there's going to be differences in approach and what makes sense given those parameters as well. So if while I've been talking, you actually think this is interesting and you might want to do some of this, I thought I'd finish off with a few tips or places that you can start. My very first piece of advice is start by looking inwards, not outwards. There is so much content out there telling you how to do this and what you should do and why, but actually you know your fund the best. Figure out what's your competitive edge, what makes you different. Where are your bottlenecks as a company? What are you doing again and again manually? Go back to your first principles approach and identify where to start. That would be my advice. Secondly, start off targeting those pain points, those bottlenecks with the low-code tools. Automate some processes. Get your team the right toolkit. My recommendation on your competitive edge is start with SaaS. There are so many great tools out there that can probably do the job for you to start with. Negotiate hard, get yourself a good deal, and use that to try product out. Use plug-and-play data sources, use a next-gen CRM, and push those to the limit before you start building things yourself. And finally, when you get to the stage where you really have pushed that to the limit, number 1, don't knock contractors. Contractors are great for trying out a product function, for trying out building something yourself before making the big leap. Scope your projects in detail, build a POC, test it, make sure people actually want to use it. And then when you're ready, hire a product person and an engineer before a data scientist. I know I would say that because I'm a product person, but I think it will genuinely make sure that you're building the right things at the right time. And with that, I think that's everything from me. Open for questions.
Hello, okay, good. Thank you for that. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for your words. It's interesting you went from SaaS to VC. I can see the connection. Some things just make sense. So I like the way you view things once you're on the other side of the fence. We have a couple good questions here. How can the VC's finance team add value to the portfolio?
Oh, that's a good question.
I think so too. Okay, I haven't seen the tablet until right now, so there might be some cleaning up to do. Give me a moment, or maybe Marek, if you don't mind, give me some support here.
Which qualitative data about founder teams do you consider to be important?
Thank you. Thank you.
So qualitative data is very underrated. In general, at Balderton, we have what we call a founder assessment and a team assessment framework. So what the team has done is, given we've been investing for over 20 years, sat down and looked at what all of the great founders and teams have had in common. And we've come up with some broad themes. They're nothing revolutionary that we try and focus on. So that could be anything from, what's their previous experience and have they demonstrated an entrepreneurial flair, all the way to almost kind of stubbornness or persistence. Will they keep going in the face of challenge? That framework is then used when we're meeting the team. So throughout that time, if the partner is sitting down with the team at a dinner, those are the things they'll have in their head. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah. Actually, I'm happy to walk around the room with a mic if you have any outstanding questions, or feel free to go ahead and go onto Slido and ask any further questions. Give me a moment, coming over to you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Just a follow-up to the question you were already asked, but then if you create this framework out of the 20 years of experience, do you still consider that the entrepreneurs or the successful entrepreneurs of the new age or of the upcoming 10 years will have the same key success factors as those of the previous 20 years?
It's a really good question. We do constantly challenge ourselves to try and make sure that we are looking into the more recent data and the more recent examples to revalidate our framework. We actually do this every 2 years, and so far we haven't had to change that framework hugely, but it's something that we constantly look at. It's also worth noting, so if you think about that framework, we're not necessarily looking for someone to tick 6 out of 6 boxes, for example. We're looking for spikes. We're looking for people who are completely outsized in a certain area. So over time, those spikes and where they're needed might change, but overall, those criteria still hold.
Thank you.
Perfect. We have another question up on the board. Can you elaborate a bit more on the topic of taking quantitative data and turning them into qualitative data and turning them into quantitative data?
Yes, of course. So I think there's 2 elements of this which I would highlight. One is very, very standard processing qualitative data, which is if you send out a survey or a form to someone and get back qualitative responses, how do you process them and turn them into data? So a good example of this for us is when a new deal is voted on. Obviously, you have to vote and you have to submit a form. And often there's lots of information in there which is written in words. Whereas actually what we care about are specific phrases or numbers. So you're literally just searching through a string to find elements which you can then extract and do analysis on. The second version of this is the LLM approach, right? So we have a portfolio company called DeepSet that we're currently using to extract numbers from charts and tables. So turning qualitative, unstructured pitch decks into numbers and data points that, again, we can use to do analysis on.
Thank you very much. We have a comment up there that says, nice day to everyone. We have an optimist in the group, so thank you for that. We acknowledge you back and say nice day to you as well. How do you balance being vision-led, pushing transformative ideas to your teams, versus demand-led, doing only what stakeholders ask you?
This is someone who understands my challenges. So it's hard, is the answer, especially in a business where when something's urgent, it's really urgent. The way that I try to balance this is I do a huge road mapping vision piece at the start of the year to define with our leadership what we should be working on. And then I allocate a certain proportion of the team's time to those vision items and the rest of the time to the more demand-led stuff. So we're trying to be a bit push and pull. We have a transparent roadmap which is available to the entire firm. So if someone comes to me and says, hey, Keshvi, I really need this thing right now, I can say, well, actually, here are all the things that are in front of you. So we need to do a bit of prioritization here. Of course, there's going to be situations where something is crucial and it needs to happen now. But usually that transparent prioritization helps to balance and make sure the vision stuff doesn't fall behind.
Great answer. Thank you. Do you think Quant VC is really possible soon as investing is also something humans have fun?
I think this is a question which doesn't get asked very often, right? Which is just because we are able to, should we? I think that the ability to use data science and data models in this industry is just going to increase. That's just the way things are going. But I'm not sure whether it is the right thing to do in every situation for every firm. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens over the next 5 to 10 years and whether some of these challenger funds who are completely quant-driven actually make outsized returns and start to push the whole industry or not. But yeah, one of the things that our investment team tells me again and again is they love meeting founders. That's what they love doing. My view on that is, okay, let's not replace that. Let's replace all of the other work you don't like doing.
Great, thank you. How has having a product team benefited, made more successful the portfolio companies at Balderton?
Good question. So there's a few tactical examples I can give you, but at an overall level, I would say what we've managed to do is take the internal portfolio support team and kind of turbocharge what they're able to do every day. So for example, we have a community team which works with the CXOs of all our portfolio companies and creates events for them, provides them with advice, provides them with shortcuts or connections to other people in the industry. We last year built a community platform to help that team scale their support. What that means is that now if someone has a question, they have a platform that they can go to see if they can find the answer, and that just means that we can serve more of those companies. Another great example here is benchmarking. So one of the things that we try and do to support our companies is to help give them an idea of where they are versus what we think good looks like. And of course, that's a hugely tech-driven and data-driven project in and of itself.
Excellent, thank you. What has been the most impactful change automation that Balderton have initiated? Is there a change that all the analysis suggested would work but then failed?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Mm-hmm.
What's the most impactful change? I actually think the most impactful change or automation was one of the most low-hanging fruits when I joined Balderton, which was, so the team used to have access, the investment team used to have access to a lot of data, but they used to have to go proactively into each data platform to get access to that data. So they were spending hours every week doing their data-driven sourcing, which was sit down at computer, open 7 tabs, and go through the companies in each one. And all we did was take those companies via API and push them to the CRM in a status called Magic Inbox. It was super simple. It didn't take us very long to develop. And it saved each investor probably an hour to an hour and a half a week. Very, very low-hanging fruit, and this is why I'm a big believer in process automation. Is there a change that all the analysis suggested would work, but then failed? Not yet, but I'm sure we're going to find one.
Love the transparency. Okay, great, thank you. Next question is, sorry, let me put it higher up on the screen. There we go at the top. Does your work result in decreasing the size of the investment team at Balderton?
So this is a question I get asked all the time, and the answer is no. Actually, we have been hiring more investors since I joined. The approach and the ethos at Balderton, which is, again, something that I loved when I spoke to the team and joined, was we think we need investors to invest. We just want to help them invest more efficiently and better. So no, I'm not replacing all investors. I think that would be quite hard, and I don't think they would like me very much. But no, that's not our ethos at Balderton.
Fantastic. I think this is a worldwide question in general. So, okay, let me just put this one higher up. Is there no executive buy-in? Should we quit? Oh, sorry, if there is no executive buy-in, should we quit? That's a bit vague. Do you understand?
That's a tough one. I'm assuming the person asking the question is saying if from the leadership team there is no belief in this kind of product tech-driven approach, should we keep going? I think it's going to be really hard for you. I think one of the things that has helped me so much is that I've had a few champions amongst the partners. But I don't think it means it's game over. I think the thing that you have to go back to is who are your users? Who are your customers? Who need to love your product? And that doesn't actually need to be your executive. If you can, from the ground up, make sure you're building stuff that everyone else loves and provide them that feedback bottom up. But it's going to require a lot of hard graft, a lot of trying to find those wins and then really telling the story. But I think it is possible.
Great, thank you. Okay, we have a couple more questions that we can get through, and after that we will be going to lunch, but not yet. Okay, what core signals do you consider when sourcing deals, and what data points are you using? For example, Harmonic.
So I can talk to this one at a high level. Again, I'm going to say something very boring, which is we're not doing anything revolutionary. We're just trying to do it really well. So we're using all of the standard metrics, things like LinkedIn data on founders and teams and job movement, fundraise data, app usage data, web traffic data. You know, it's nothing groundbreaking. But at the moment, our view is let's try and squeeze everything out of that data and use it well. Because actually, turning that data into something actionable, there's value across the whole fund, not just in the investment team. And I actually think you can do a lot with the table stakes.
How do you go about getting buy-in and launching new products, systems in your team? I imagine this is another pain point of yours daily, i.e. dealing with resistance and teaching best practices.
Absolutely, daily pain point. My approach has been to start with finding a champion in the team. 1 or 2 people who really, really want this thing, who can work with me closely to iterate on a POC until it's actually usable. That's been really important for me because then when you come to the rest of the team, automatically there's less resistance because someone who's doing their job is already using it. And usually there's a little bit of an element of FOMO. I want to try that. If they're using it, I want it. So that's worked really well to start embedding new processes and products within the team. In terms of dealing with resistance, I find often people aren't resistant for a philosophical reason. Usually there is a reason underneath it. So at that point, if that's what you're encountering, I think it's very important to take yourself up out of the situation and try and understand their point of view. Because usually if you keep asking them, okay, but why don't you want it? Why don't you want it? Why is that happening? You'll find out that actually there's an edge case you didn't cater for, or there's a workflow that you didn't think about. Most people aren't resistant for the sake of being resistant.
At that point, you can teach the best practices, right, with moving forward.
Exactly.
How do you balance empowering investors through product with alienating them to those ones? Sorry, going to read that again. How do you balance empowering investors through product with alienating them to those ones? And they don't know how to work anymore without them.
Okay. I'm assuming that this person is asking, how do you make sure you're empowering people, but also making sure that they're not reliant? Is that right? Hopefully.
The author is anonymous, so yeah, we have a hand raised.
Hopefully.
Do you wish to elaborate? I can bring you the microphone. Give me a moment. I'm running.
Thank you. So yes, the idea was if you give them tools, automations, do they know what is investing anymore if everything is done automatically?
It's a really good question. And I think this is where you have to come back to what should you be automating and what shouldn't you? You know, what is the right thing to do rather than just saying, let's just automate everything. So a good example for you of this is there's a lot of tools right now out there that can automate memo generation for you. So they take all of this information and they tell you what the reasons are you should invest in a company. We have decided intentionally not to automate that part of the process, precisely because we think that is one of the parts in the investment process where the investor should be building the conviction, thinking about what the true differentiator is, and then articulating that. That is what an investor is at its core. So we've been intentional about what to automate and what not to automate for this exact reason. Hopefully that answers the question.
And thank you for asking it. Okay, good. How do you track the impact of your support to portfolio founders? An example, what are the ideally quantitative metrics you can present to IMs?
So we have gone with a quantitative and qualitative approach here. I think it's really important to do both. So on the quantitative side, we will look at metrics like engagement, so engagement in the community and conversations, attendance at events, things like that. And also we run a survey every year to our community of CXOs to understand their views. So we'll use things like NPS scores and things like that. Alongside that, I think it's still important to have the stories, so specific examples where you have helped a founder to find their new CFO and you introduce them to X person who found Y candidate who's then been super successful. I think it's very hard to go any more quantitative than that just because the time to value is so long and it's hard to do the attribution piece.
Thank you. As you move along the scale to Quant VC, how do you build trust in your system to handle increasingly important tasks and make higher stakes decisions?
Oh, good question. So my first tip would be have a sandbox environment. Do not test live in production all the time. Make sure, especially as you're talking about increasingly important tasks, make sure you're doing a trial run in a sandbox environment that doesn't hit real life and demonstrate to your stakeholders, look, it works. You can try it before you go live. The second piece, which I think is really important here, is giving people transparency into what's happening behind the scenes. So making sure when you're launching that new product or feature or automation, you take even the least technical people through, here is what's happening in the background, and here's what I'm doing to get to this outcome. Because often people can't trust if they don't understand.
Thank you. A final question. How important is data strategy for developing product?
Completely crucial. Data is like the fuel for our product engine. So ultimately having the right data, knowing where it is, making sure it's usable is, it's super important. And that's why our team is one joined up team. We have a product and data team.
Thank you. We do still have one more question and we have time for it too. So do you think we will get to a point where algorithms can predict the future successes of a company accurately? For example, an exit at a certain multiple.
I'm a skeptic on this one, which is probably why I'm doing the job I'm doing. I am still skeptical on this because I think there's so many factors that lead to an exit at a certain multiple. You can probably get quite a lot of the way there with data in the next 10, 20, 30 years. but there's still a lot of unknown factors, just like environmental, world, global factors that will impact this. And I find it very tough to imagine a day where 100% of that is algorithmic.
Not to mention the human factor. We're still dealing with humans in the businesses. Everyone, please give a round of applause to Keshvi. We really appreciate you.